see, I guess I touched on it a hair, didn't I? When I said about students for the first time maybe getting excited about their education.
Do you think that's maybe the seed for lifelong learning? Or?
I do. Instead of just, oh, you jump through this hoop, then you go on and you could, like Heather said, and to her the goal was just to get an A.
Right.
And it's, there's no, and then instead I see students, back to the other cliche word, being engaged, and where it's becoming more than just, oh, I have to memorize this, but it's becoming like a catalyst for more, for lifelong learning, and this then leads to that, and it opens up more doors, and it just, you know, the ripple effect, which is just, it can, one small thing. Can I give this example that is so, it's so silly, but I realized, because we had this conversation, how such a tiny thing meant so much to me, back to feeling connected, or feeling like it's more than just the grade. So my very first class, my freshman year, well, my first quarter as a freshman, I signed up for math because I was terrified. And I thought, this will be my test. If I can handle this, then maybe I'm cut out for college. And so rather than avoid it, I just have to do this. And so of course it was in a lecture hall, 300 students, and wonderful instructor, Froderberg, he has a history of his own at Western, but he's deceased now. But anyway, bless his heart, on my final exam, and this was back in the days where it was handwritten, you had to show your work, no calculators, and you turned in your test, and then you got it back with your grade. And he actually wrote at the top of my test, "Good work!" exclamation mark. And I was so touched.
That's all it took, huh? 2 words?
I was like, he noticed.
Wow.
And also reaffirming for me, because of my math fear, knowing that that was my weak subject. But look, I can do it. And I did, I worked really hard and I aced that class. But the A was secondary. I've never forgotten. I can still see it at the top of that final exam. Good work! Exclamation.
And that's a really good point, right? Because we sort of talk about how we give feedback to students, and that when we say great job, is that sending a different message than great work, right? Because great work then implies that they've worked at it, and that there is that recognition of having worked at it.
Job is kind of more the result, like, oh, this is good, but you know, whatever you did to do it.
It's making me second think how I would give my feedback.
I'm glad that I told that
Yeah,
silly
me too.
little story, because I remember thinking, good God, you know, am I just ridiculous that I would be so excited and touched by that gesture? But he had 300 students in just that one class, and that he actually acknowledged, he recognized my hard work. It made me happy, and it reaffirmed for me that I can do this, and you know, so there's so many. I think that is one of the things that I wish that everyone, and I think most of the people that work here know this already, but that sometimes it's the littlest thing that can mean the most, or it might be just that extra little moment that you take to give a student who maybe is just like, they're not showing it outwardly, but they're maybe just like starting to crumble. Like with being overwhelmed, and I just don't know if I should be here or if I can keep doing this. And then it gives them encouragement. And I've actually heard this from students saying that because of so-and-so, I'm still here. And you know, so somebody, that again goes back to the connected, you know, that even if you can connect in some way, even if not maybe interpersonally, but like Heather was saying before too, about how this is not just a means to the end, but that, you know, getting your card punched,
Mhm.
but that the connected that in somehow what I'm doing now matters because it will help me down the road
Mhm.
in any direction I choose to go.
But I like what you said about people and getting help too, because as I'm reading your article here, talking about how, you know, we can overcome challenges with effort, new strategies, learning, help from others, and patience, because that's also something that when I was focused on grades and getting A's, I wanted to do everything myself, and I didn't really ask for help, and now I'm in a role where I'm helping students and realizing, oh, I wish that I'd understood that, you know, it's okay to get help. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong, and it makes you more adept at using the resources around you. I don't want to say using because we're talking about people, but I mean, let's face it, people are
People are
also,
a resource,
relationships are a resource,
Mhm.
networks are a resource, so,
That's what we're here for.
yeah, right,
Mhm.
yep.
Yeah.
We are rolling. Would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Jessica Larson, and I am the transfer advisor on campus here at Whatcom.
Thanks for joining us today, Jessica.
Yeah.
So, I was wondering if you could tell us what student success means to you.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
It's a big question. Student success for me is I'm uncomfortable defining it just by benchmarks like graduation rates or passing the class, because I think it's a much bigger and much more complex issue than that, much more multidimensional. So for me, student success is students making informed choices that are moving them towards life goals, such as academic and career clarity, or maybe moving towards better mental or physical health, financial stability. It could also be degree attainment, but I think some of those smaller benchmarks fall into that bigger picture of student success for me.
Yeah. So in your job, how do you see yourself facilitating student success or helping students be successful?
That's another great question. I think for me it's multi-level too, because sometimes in my conversations with students, we realize that the student shouldn't be here right now, you know, for a variety of reasons.
Can you give an example of how
Yeah.
that might look?
So, for example, if a student has maybe been going through some going through a career development process, trying to decide which way they want to go, and realizing, hey, Whatcom doesn't have the program I want, so it's better for the student to go to BTC or Western or wherever, just because we're not going to offer what they need. But also, you know, sometimes I work with students and their lives are just falling apart a little bit, and so for their health, for the health of their family, for stability, it's sometimes better to take a quarter off, take a couple quarters off, and come back.
What is one thing about your job that you think maybe students don't know that you'd like them to know about how you help them succeed or how you want to help them succeed?
I was not ready for that question.
That one's in progress. But what would you say to students about their success and your connection to their success that you think they might not know, or that you'd want them to know?
I want them to know that I care very, very deeply about their success, and that I feel a big responsibility for helping students navigate their time here at Whatcom, picking out a major, picking out classes, developing career clarity, and then making that transition to the university. And I want them to know that I realize how complex that is. It's incredibly complex, and that I'm here to help, and that I take it really seriously.
In your opinion, or from your experience, what do you think is the largest barrier or obstacle to student success, regardless of how we define it?
Whoa, the biggest barrier. Oh my gosh.
What gets in the way?
Finances.
Uh,
I think that's huge. I think lots of other stuff going on in students' lives, balancing work, family, health. I mean, all those things, while also trying to give top priority to school, can be extremely challenging. And I think also maybe developing that career and academic clarity gets in the way sometimes, because I think, and I did this, I went to school because you went to college. you know, and trying to navigate, like, why am I here? Where do I want to go? While at the same time trying to pass your classes and progress can be super challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned being a student yourself, because that's my next question is, can you tell us about one time where you felt successful as a student? A
Yes, I
specific
can.
incident or
Yes.
example? Okay.
So I went to Western. I started as a freshman, and I can't remember. It's Math 112 there. That's our Math 99, and I failed it miserably. It was my freshman year, and I felt totally defeated. And my advisor was like, go to the community college near your home and retake the class. And so that's what I did over the summer. I balanced that working with like 30-hour-a-week job, and I was like laser focused on that math class. I stayed late. I had a tutor. You know, I was determined to pass that class, and I had a fabulous instructor at my community college and a small class, and I got a B, and that was huge for me. I was a person who was pretty math phobic, didn't think I was good at it, but I got a B in that class.
Okay. And so you kind of answered the next question, which was one time you felt like a failure as a student and what you learned from that. Sounds like those were tied up together. Failure and
there's
success.
more.
Was there another failure
yeah.
that you learned something from?
So the major that I was on it was suggested that I try and get through pre-calculus, and I tried 3 times at Western and withdrew. I failed once, withdrew a couple times, and it shattered me on the inside pretty badly. Looking back on the experience, especially from an advising lens, I knew pretty early on in those classes that I wasn't doing well, and didn't do anything to help myself necessarily. Didn't say, hey, this is not a good fit for me, or, you know, maybe I should try and take pre-calculus at a community college or utilize the resources. I was in pretty heavy denial because it was much easier than dealing with the reality that I was failing another math class.
If you could sum up student success in one word, do you have one?
The word that comes to mind is empowerment.
Why empowerment?
Students taking control of their time here at Whatcom, or their time away from Whatcom, or wherever they're going to be, you know, saying, this is what I want, this is what I want to get out of my time at school, and I'm going to do it, you know. Feeling like students have a choice in their lives, or, you know, having a choice in how their lives are going to progress.
How often would you say you see students having that sense of empowerment?
Probably not as often as I would like. Again, because I think there's a lot of variety of factors, including maybe this pipeline that we like to funnel students through. And not when I say we, I don't just mean Whatcom, but society in general.
Is there anything specific that you do to help students feel that sense of empowerment?
I try to, when I'm having conversations with students, I always try to frame it in, you have choices, you know, and what do you want your time to look like? Whether it's here or, you know, even a broader picture of like your life in general, or you know, jobs, family, whatever. So I try and always bring it back to, what do you want? And what do you want to do to get there?
What do you do when people just have no idea what they want?
I know. I feel a lot of empathy for that, because it took me many, many years to figure out where I was going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really multi-layered, you know, conversation. Why do you have no idea? You know, or why are you having a hard time making the decision? And then what supports can I offer you to help you get there?
Is there anything else you want to say about student success? Any other burning thoughts or questions?
I'm really glad we're talking about it.
Yeah, good.
I think it's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Alright. So can you just say who you are, what you do?
Sure. My name is Brian Davidson, and I'm a career and academic advisor at Whatcom Community College. I work with a program called the Worker Training Program and Passport to College Promise. So I work with dislocated workers and former foster youth and a variety of other folks.
So, student success, what does that mean to you? How would you define that phrase, or how would you explain it?
I think when I think of student success, I think there are things that I think that it is not, and there are things that I think that it might be. But I don't know that I have a really good way of defining it in a concise or articulate manner. I can say that student success is not based off of a whole bunch of universal outcomes. It's not based off of external measurements from some, government agency or from a college itself. I think it's something that is co-created between students and instructors and pro-social others. I think that it is recursive. I think it's growth-based and it's strategic. I think it cultivates goals, and those goals have to emerge. They're not static. I also don't think it's necessarily a goal itself. It also might just be the motivation and the feeling behind that forward momentum. I think it involves reflection. It involves vision. Yeah.
How do you go about measuring it?
I think that in order to measure success, I think first of all, you pretty much have to ask the student. I don't think ultimately you wouldn't ask anybody else. And because it's reflective, I believe that the results of that measurement can and will change based off of any context or point in time for that student. I think they're going to be different between students. Even very similar students may have a different idea of what success is at any given moment. So perhaps it's maybe better to not have one defining moment to measure success, but to be able to measure it over time and watch that trend in the way that success rises and falls over the course of a student's engagement in school. Although I don't believe that there should be necessarily the common or universal measures for success that we see right now as the ultimate and best measurement of student success, I do think that you can look at some of those measurements as the fruits of engaging in student success. So what I mean when I say that is, if we are properly engaging students in their own definition of success and walking strategically along that pathway to success, we ought to see some evidence in our traditional forms of measurement of that success in our system. And that would be things like, GPA and graduation rates and so forth.
So, can you talk a little bit about how, regardless of how we define student success, can you talk a little bit about how you facilitate it
Hold on
in
a
your...
second.
Oh, yeah.
Got this like downward angle.
Yeah.
I think it might look better if it's a little more. Is it hard to like kind of look?
No, it's
between-
easier.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Let you move around a little bit.
Yeah, it feels more fluid.
Cool.
Mhm.
Okay.
Although I may look shifty all the time.
Shifty eyes.
Okay.
Am I making any sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sort of sounded like rambling.
No.
Okay.
All right.
So regardless of how we define student success, how do you facilitate it in your specific job?
Okay. So specifically, when performing or working with students on the career and academic advising component of my job, I think is the best way for me to answer a question about facilitating student success. Oftentimes I meet with individuals that are in the middle of some significant transition in their life. They've lost their job, they've had something that's impacted their economic well-being, and they've got to figure out a strategy for regaining that economic well-being. They've had some sort of traumatic event in their life that's taken away a valued role in their educational or vocational environments. And so when they're coming in, they're bringing a whole lot of baggage with them, a whole lot of assumptions about what they need to do, what they can do, what they're capable of. And I believe that the best way to foster student success is that first step, which is listening to them and carefully identifying what those assumptions are that they're carrying with them. Helping them walk through the examination process of those assumptions to peel it back a little bit and identify whether those things are true or not for them and how true they are. By identifying those and looking at those with a critical eye with them, I believe it helps them to get a better view of the landscape in front of them so they can make good informed decisions and feel like they have some agency. And I think that that is the first step. And I hope that throughout the period of time that a student is engaged in school and engaged with me or my colleagues, that initial conversation and initial examination process is something that can be carried forward over time while they're in school. So it should be recursive and it should reflect back on those initial sort of conversations. And hopefully, as new things come up for them, as they grow, as their definition of success changes, as they come in contact with new material or new ideas or new directions, they have the ability to maybe themselves look at those assumptions as they're arising, examine them themselves, or be able to work with me or somebody else to examine those too and get a clearer picture again as things unfold for them.
So, from your perspective, what are the major obstacles or barriers to any version of student success? What most gets in the way?
What gets in the way of student success? Again, I think it goes back to misaligned assumptions that a student may have. Wondering whether or not they're too old to go to school, whether there's an academic or financial path. So it's basically fears. It's basically fears, and some of those fears are real, but they're not necessarily insurmountable. Oftentimes, so there are extra pressures. They could come from media, they could come from parents, they could come from peers, and I think that bringing those things, I think, is the first step. And there are significant structural problems as well. Okay, there is not enough money for people to go to school. So functionally, when we're working with students, there's these barriers that we work with, and I don't want to pretend that those structural things are not there. Okay, I don't want to pretend that at all. But when we have to still work through those barriers with students. So maybe when I'm talking about this, I'm not focusing on those larger barriers, but more like functionally how we work through those. So I think that everybody's going to be faced with the structural piece, and some of those things are going to have assumptions and fears that come with it. And then how do we go through that and work through step by step to eliminate those fears, identify the hopeful paths, right, and then work with those piece by piece to try to circumnavigate some of these structural elements. With any luck, we can do some things to address those structural elements externally, but that's not the kind of thing you do one-on-one with a person. You still have to help that individual person. It's a little different if we're talking about large groups of people than an individual that's sitting right there in front of you that has to feed their family, has to go to school, and has to overcome some of the self-doubt and those sort of things that come along with it too. Does that make sense? Did I miss that one? Okay.
No.
Okay.
What's one thing that you would want students to know that you feel about their success that you think students might not know? Does that question make sense? It's kind of a poorly phrased question. But
It does. Well, I think that there's a lot of things that I would like students to know, so that's the thing. And so it's difficult to choose one that I think they would be, because depending on where somebody's starting, I may want them to know something different. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I think that there's a transition when anybody's going into school, whether someone has come to school in the past and they're re-engaging in school, whether it's their first time or whether they've never been, and they're coming back as a returning adult student. I think it's very important for them to know that they belong and that there's a role that's theirs that they can own. And I think that it's important because that breaks down some barriers about how can I engage equally with my instructors, okay? Equally with the staff, advisors and such, and with the community as well. So knowing that I'm a student, I'm a learner, that gives me a responsibility and it gives me a pass. It gives me a pass to actually go out there and ask questions of everybody. Freely ask questions in a very open way with some authenticity without having any fears. Because that's what we want people to do. I want people to be able to show up and ask me questions. And I want people to go to their instructors and be able to engage them about fear that they are more knowledgeable or better than them. It's really a Ooh, I'm going to ask this question differently. Actually, I want them to know that education is a collaboration, okay? And they have a very specific role to play. And that role is not less than, it is equal to everybody else that's playing in that whole system. And that includes administrators and teachers and maybe your future employer or the industry that you might be working in. You can go and you can play that role by asking those questions and doing the learning. And that's really what that's all about. So it is this equal footing, this co-created sort of process. That's what I want. That's it. Yeah.
Can you talk about a time where you personally felt successful as a student?
Yeah, I can. So I went to, this might go a little long, I don't get enough tape. So
I got 2 minutes on this one. Should I get another card?
I don't have, yeah.
All right, I'll get another card.
I'm gonna pause this one. Actually, no, I'm just gonna keep rolling because every time I stop
Yeah.
taping, somebody says something that I want on tape.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, it's constant. I was telling Brian, I was talking with a student in here when I came into the room. He was studying in here, and we had this, ended up having this great 15-minute conversation about what he was studying and why, and these other paths he was thinking about, and what he'd looked into and decided not to do, and what he really liked to do, and how to have balance in his life between, you know, healthy living and the studying and putting food on the table and figuring out what he was passionate about. It was just like, man, I should have been rolling tape this whole time. It was bad.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to, if you guys want to interview me at some point, that's, you know, I'd be fine with that.
We would love to.
Yeah, because I do have kind of a weird idea of success.
Good. Need
Doesn't
some-
really
need a
fit
variety
into
of
the normal
perspectives.
metrics.
Yeah, I would love to do that today or whenever you want.
Well, I don't know. I'm not feeling it today, but
Okay, we'll do it another time.
next time,
There's plenty of
where I
times.
can think about what I'm going to say.
For
and,
sure.
Maybe shower. I'm kidding. I showered.
I was thinking Brian looks very professorial today.
Oh,
Yeah,
really? I thought
you
I-
are really good at talking off the cuff. By the
Yeah.
way, you are full of big words. Oh, shit.
I think that's a good documentary
Yeah.
look.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
it
gotta
definitely
go there.
looks like
Yeah.
from this angle. I like this the angle here better.
Oh, okay.
Well, I did very carefully blow dry my beard out today.
Is that right?
Indeed.
The extra care shows.
But I didn't wear my my button-up shirt and like sport coat specifically to be less professorial.
Yeah.
So maybe I was trying to split the difference there.
I was interviewing Seth Fleetwood for my PSA about voting all the way down the ballot. And I had the camera rolling in, and he got a phone call, and I just kept recording. And he's like, "Oh, hi, Mom." You know, so
Yes.
I was gonna put that in the video at the end.
That would have been funny, yeah.
Yeah, because
That would
he's
be
like,
funny.
if you know him, he's so dorky already.
Do the threads go backwards on that?
No, it's
I've been having a hard time with that too.
Because it looks like you're going left.
no, I'm not.
Okay.
It's just hard to get on there.
It is.
I think.
Or this one is at least.
Okay. I know that was driving you crazy, huh? Probably.
I was doing it with the battery on this one in here with Kiki. She was there for like 5 minutes. I was trying to put the stupid battery back
Oh,
in.
no.
Yeah, and
But I
you
could
look
tell it was
stupid.
distracting her. Yeah.
With this, all these like straps and lens cap.
There's a lot of
Okay.
stuff.
This card cannot be. Oh
Come on, card.
I'm gonna do it the easy way this time, though. And I have to take this off. All right. Why doesn't this cover? Is it locked? Let's try that.
I'd like to start smoking chicken wings and drinking beer now. It is 12:15.
Are there results already?
No,
No.
or I'm not looking at them anyway. one of our colleagues had just printed up a giant map of the United States on white paper. It's like this big, with all of the numbers for the electoral college on each of the states. So her and her family could
Fill them in.
could color them in.
Yeah. Interactive election results.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I'm not that nerdy, you know? Just, it's interesting, but
No,
For me, it's more like the internet does that for me.
indeed it does. I should probably turn that off so we don't have owls howling at us while I'm. Or maybe that's
That
great.
would be actually kind of a cool sonic touch. Hooting owls.
Oh, and it's actually student success learning community telling me things.
Oh.
Okay, 28 minutes.
I should do it. Probably.
Okay. No more owls.
What were you getting told about student success learning community?
Rowan had added something
Oh, cool.
All right.
for the examples of, I don't remember. Okay.
All right.
Good to go?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So a time when you felt successful as a student.
Oh, indeed. Okay, so to kind of explain like when I felt most successful as a student was, I think, the moment that I actually identified that I was actually a learner. And that may sound stupid. Like, of course, I spent like a good chunk of my life, in high school when I was learning stuff, and I recognize that. And not just formal, but also informal learning as well along the way. And but it was when I got to college and started, and the moment that I actually felt like I might have some like academic potential, I think, was different. And so I went to university right out of high school, first generation college student, went to an in-state school because I found out that was a way to go. Like if you graduated from high school in that state, you could go to a state institution. So I was like, good, sign me up. How far away can I get from my hometown? And so that's what I did. And then I spent the first couple of years doing what a lot of students right out of high school do, which is kind of figuring out who you are. And I, drank a lot. You know what I mean? And like that sort of thing. And didn't do so well and ended up with like a 1.79 or something in my GPA and had to petition to keep going to school. I mean, I was learning things, but I didn't know how to pull it all together. And it was still a really important period of my life because I was basically sloughing off a good chunk of the baggage that came from my hometown and that sort of thing. So it was really important development for me. But it didn't say a lot in terms of what was of success at that moment, right? I was like at a 1.9. For all practical purposes, I was not a successful student. But I wanted to be. And then one summer, I decided to stick around. Maybe it was the second summer. I don't know. The chronology of things are useless for me. But I do know that there was a summer that came up, and it was before I started doing really well in school. And I chose to take a class. There was a team-taught kind of special class for the summer, and it was taught by a cultural anthropology instructor and a sociology instructor, and they were partners. And it was so it was this team-taught class, and it was culture and sexuality. So of course it was a topic that was interesting and very fun, and but the way that it was taught was different. It was smaller, so it was the first class where there was a lot more discussion based, and we brought in, there were speakers because they weren't teaching in the summertime. We were able to come out from I think Purdue or something, just these amazing folks, and we got to like have barbecues together and just geek out on these topics. And I liked being able to make the connections, those big ideological jumps between like the sociology components and the cross-cultural components from the cultural anthropology piece. And I was like, this is really a fascinating game, and I got excited about ideas. And I did well in the class. And it was I think it was during that summer that I actually had a way of identifying a salient role for me as a learner. That I could actually do this stuff, and I could hang with some really smart folks, and maybe even contribute something. And it was with that shifted from this so again, it was an identity piece. I'd been working on one part of identity, and then it shifted during that summer, and it became something that was more about, like, it was the traditional success of the student. So from then on, I did well, and I went from that 1.79 or whatever it was that I had, and ended up, I think I graduated with like a 3.4, which I'm pretty happy with. That was great. But anyway, so I was able to meet some of those benchmarks of student success that the institution may have wanted me to have. But those didn't matter near as much as that moment where I was able to identify myself as a learner, and that meant something to me, and it was mine and not somebody else's.
This may be wrapped up in some of what you just said, but is there a specific time you felt like a failure as a student?
I still have dreams. Still, I'm almost 40, and I still have dreams that I'm showing up to class and my paper's not done, right? Like, so I think they were probably, I don't know, I don't think I ever felt like a failure. I didn't feel like I belonged, okay? So when I first went to university, I still didn't feel like I belonged there. I felt like I belonged in the culture, right? But I didn't necessarily feel like I belonged in the classroom or in the process, actually. It was the not having an academic advisor, not knowing how the system worked at all, not understanding it. I went in as an anthropology student, and then I was there for like 4 years, and one of my main instructors asked me when I was graduating, and I had no idea, you know? And she says, well, come into my office, and yeah, actually, this is when I felt like a failure. This is actually it. And it was, but again, I'd already felt like I was a learner at this point. I'd already identified that this was an important piece, that I had something to offer. I had a voice, I had a brain. But then when I was asked how I actually get the degree and how I complete, then I had no concept of what I was doing. She brought me into her office and said, let's go through your academic plan. And she says, you know, you're an anthropology student and not a sociology student, but I've been taking your classes for years, right? And I said, oh, yeah, well, I figured, I was taking sociology classes. I was a sociology student, right? And she said, no, that's not how it works. And so we went back and looked at what I needed to do, and it was going to take an extra 6 months for me to graduate. So I think it took me maybe it took me 5 years. I don't remember. Like I said, the chronology is not really there. But it took me like longer than what the institution wanted me to do to complete my bachelor's degree. And I didn't understand, and there was like minor requirements and things that I just didn't know because I didn't have an advisor. I did not know where to look for those things, and that's where I felt like a failure. I did not know how to navigate that system, and that felt awful. And I was in tears in her office because I was like, I didn't know how to pull all that together, and there were decisions that needed to be made, like, what's the purpose of this degree? What am I doing with it? And all of a sudden I was faced with all these questions that I had not been faced with because all I wanted to do was learn cool stuff and be engaged, right? So then we had to like figure out some of these extra classes, some of the graduation requirements. To this day, I still don't know what they are. I have no idea how I got the degree. I'm an academic advisor now. I build degree plans for people every day. And I have no idea how I got my bachelor's degree. I mean, I remember stuff, it's really great, but I don't know the details of how I got that degree. And so we tried some different things. So my instructor was like, well, started to get me on that idea of like, well, you're going to go on to graduate school, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I'd done some research before, and I presented at a conference, and I'm like, I don't want to just sit here and write sociology research papers for other sociologists to read and not actually do any good for any. That was kind of the feeling that I had at the time. So she tried on a bunch of things. She's like, well, why do you try out journalism? And I took like one class, and it was like, here's how you write stupid to people. That's what I got out of it anyway. Here's how you dumb down your writing so people can understand. I'm like, this is not what I want to do, And then it was like, anyway, a variety of things like that. And it ended up, I'm on some random tangent now. I forgot what I was talking about. But the point of it is that I had to make these decisions, and I would have liked to have understood how to navigate the system, how to understand what the function and the purpose of the degrees or the purpose of individual graduation requirements, so I could have used them strategically to my advantage because I had no idea, and it was a lot of existential and emotional stress. And the end result is when I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I had this degree where I learned a bunch. I have no idea what the utility of it was. And frankly, I didn't even think that I had any skills. I'd done some really great work. I did some research with a professor. I did some organizing for a couple of human rights conferences and drove human rights workers around the Pacific Northwest. And not once did I have any concept of how to link the work that I was doing there with a future career, with networking with other folks, and able to grow. Once they handed me that diploma, which in fact I actually didn't know they didn't hand you a diploma when you graduated until I was actually there on stage that day. That's how much I didn't know about this, right? And that was a real disservice because when I was done, it was really difficult because I was really lost. And I think that that's a really common experience, especially for, a lower middle class white male. It's like, okay, great, I've got this bachelor's degree now, and I don't need to make a ton of money, so let's help, let's do something. And then it's like, that's not how that works, dude. So anyway, I guess the question was, when did I feel like a failure? The failure was being able to pull this together, navigate that system, and understand the utility of what I was doing. It was never really in my abilities as a thinker or as a learner or somebody who was producing any material or anything like that.
Do you have anything that you tell other students who feel like they don't belong at college?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you say to them?
Well, I think I tell them straight up that this was built for them. That's what the community college is there for, to provide that sort of access to education for all members of the community, regardless of where they're starting. Now, I recognize that there's still access problems, but that's what it's built for. And that's where it starts. And then to try to acknowledge by listening to where they are at with their identity, where those intersections do not meet. Where does it not feel like they belong? And on occasion, I would like to use stories of people I've met along the way, or of myself or my family members or my colleagues that sort of explore a similar identity, and to sort of illustrate that there is a place for them to belong, and try to acknowledge the importance of them bringing a different voice to the curriculum, and to that classroom mix, and then eventually out there into whatever they're going to do with it, And so I think it's a very explicit thing.
Anything else you want to say about student success?
I don't think that we have enough tape, and I think that I'm done. Yeah, thank you though.
Thank you.
Yeah.